Right, this is the explanation of the source of this knowledge. Who are we, the dictators of this book, unseen by the living and unknown to them? What do we look like? Turn to the front of this book, and I've written stuff, but I haven't had it printed. At the moment, I feel rather sort of that I've looked into printing, and it just seems to be able to find someone to pick up a book. I don't know how people find publishers. It's almost like they don't want to publish unless it's something pointless or you know somebody. And I don't know, I'll have a go. But anyway, my mother has the idea of the front of this book should be my mother's painting of the Holy Ladder and what she saw, which was one of her visions. And I still have the painting, and well, we'll try it. So anyway, imagine that I'm doing this book. So turn to the front of this book, and there you will see painted, as well as the physical writer was able, what she saw herself, posed on a never-ending staircase, a horde of the non-living, both men and women of all of European race, but unseen and unknown to the living. Invisible, we can move in and out of the living world, our various tasks to do, and our task is to run the living planet. We are men and some women on another structure, invisible to the living, but of this planet, involved with this planet, and therefore deeply concerned about its future. In the very first interview the writer had with our leader, who did not wish to appear in the robes that are customarily worn here, he explained everything you need to know is simple and logical. Such mysteries as there are completely beyond the comprehension of ordinary people. These words are true, and this book must be understandable to everyone who is capable of reading it. In order to give a simple understanding about ourselves and what and who we are, we have to explain a little bit about creation and how it works. What is the other side, or upstairs, as the writer's family refer to us? Have we approached the writer from paradise, heaven, or whatever anybody who is alive in the physical world regards the unknown, life after death, or life after life, as it has also been described? Here we have to tread somewhat upon the beliefs of all those who subscribe to the different religions, and stress that this is not of itself a religious message, as almost all religions encourage the living to believe in paradise, heaven, and life after death as being far superior to life in the physical sense. Remember that nobody who is alive can truly claim to have been here in the true sense, whereas we who are dictating this book are here all the time and can speak from experience, and in fact can in fact give a fairly accurate description of what it is like to be on this structure. Firstly, we have to explain that we cannot be born here in the same way as birth takes place in the living world. At one time, we too were born in the living world, and after that life we must have been placed here to help run this planet, and until the reader has read the chapter on the creation of life, he or she cannot fully comprehend exactly how we come to exist at all. So this short chapter attempts to explain who we, the dictators of this message, are. We exist on another structure that neither eats, excretes, nor marries, or is given in marriage, or gives birth, or owns any possessions whatsoever, excepting a simple robe of whatever colour is enjoyed by the wearer. And all these robes are of simple construction, and are given to us after we have passed into this place. And we may have only 3 at any one time. I think I've already explained that when I was doing the letter from a father to his son. We sleep in a simple room, as we also grow tired after a certain number of hours, and need also a very special sort of treatment to refresh our bodies, which look similar but are different to yours. Without this refreshing power, which is given to us about every 2nd or 3rd day, or when we feel the need of it, we would simply fade away. Just as you, the reader of this book, grow tired, so also do we, and a life beyond 200 or 300 years on this structure becomes intolerable to most people, as they wish to live again. These bodies also begin to fade or wear out after 200 or 300 years, and the owner must either go into store or be found another life in this planet. Reincarnation and the understanding of it will be another chapter. People speak about life after death as if it were spent seated on a cloud drifting about the universe. Any sensible person who thinks intelligently about life as it must be lived by any being must see that without a body of some sort life would be intolerable. Fearsome heads kept in some sort of a machine as portrayed in various space fiction films, or any other of the ridiculous ideas seen in these fantasy films would be quite horrific for the unfortunate person thus contained. Everyone knows instinctively that there is more around them than they can see and hear in the physical living world. All religions that try to help the living tell people so. And it is natural for people to pray for help in times of stress and difficulty. There must be something, people often say. Even those whose hazy contemplations lead them not to organized religions, but to things often rather strange, even ludicrous. Even they must realize within themselves that there is something beyond this life, whatever it might be. In the ensuing pages, I'll go back to that. There must be something more beyond this life, whatever it might be. In the ensuing pages, we, the other side, attempt to explain as much as is possible to the living, who in the course of time will die and become as we are, by no means dead, but living on another structure. It is only possible for those who have lived and died to remain as we are for no longer than 200 or 300 years at the most. Then what about all the past religious leaders, people ask? They lived on earth a very long time ago and presumably are still there. What about them? Here we must hasten to add that for very special people who have tremendously important tasks here, sometimes for a very long time, very special sorts of powers have to be given to them, so that they may remain here until that task is done. Unweary of their task, they wish to be given another physical life, not necessarily in your little planet, but elsewhere in the universe. Perhaps in another planet where their special gifts and skills are needed desperately for another civilization somewhere. So before we can talk about creation, we really must talk about the other side, what it is, where it is, and how this planet full of living people of all races is run and ordered. All religious people believe in paradise, life after death, a marvellous place of indescribable beauty, where there is no need to work, there are no worries, all your loved ones will be around you, and your own particular God will be there to comfort and bestow the greatest possible joy to everyone, provided always that one has proved oneself worthy of achieving this marvellous place. Otherwise, of course, one may find oneself in hell to suffer eternal remorse for your manifold sins. Man himself is the ultimate goal of creation, and the planets, of which there must be billions of all sorts, sizes and types, is merely his physical home, and the place where he must live. As we have already said, every living creature, no matter on whatever structure he is living, must have a body, and he must have somewhere to live. And the theory of damp clouds for the non-living in the physical sense, as you, the readers, will one day become, is quite ridiculous. Perhaps before we try to explain as simply as we can how humanity is created, the question could be asked, why? What is it all for? To that there can be no answer, excepting that only that extremely clever and exceptional people very often simply disappear, and all their records with them, and it is believed that once someone of either sex reaches a certain excellence of development, that person goes further up the ladder of creation, and possibly is reincarnated into a much larger and very much more advanced type of humanity than the one that lives here. First and foremost, it must be understood that reincarnation is the whole basis of creation, although it is barely believed by most Western people. What we are trying to say to humanity is that everything you need to know is truly quite logical, and those things that are mysterious and beyond the comprehension of man as he exists in this planet is best dismissed as beyond contemplation. To those people who dismiss reincarnation as a horrendous idea and prefer to believe in the eternal paradise of life after death, where everyone lives for eternity, bathed in some sort of divine light, surrounded by such happiness and joy as to make physical life a very nasty reality, one must consider very carefully what it is that makes most people happiest. The most wonderful holiday in the most delightful, sunny, beautiful place, where there is nothing to do whatsoever but sit in the sun or laze about, begins to pall after about 10 days or so, and everyone begins to look forward to the return to the things familiar, to work and the daily grind, as it's described. Heaven or paradise, as people like to imagine, is a totally impossible idea. Human beings need to work, to be busy, to have goals to work for, even if insignificant ones. And after even perhaps 100 years or so on the rest plains, people almost always ask to be given another life. Boredom is the bane of intelligent people, and the prospect of sitting around anywhere, however beautiful, would utterly destroy most of those who consider this to be their ultimate future. Consider the lives of most people in the Western world. Perhaps very few are deliriously happy, but they're busy. Every day is another day, but busy and full of different things to think about and do. Beyond the understanding of reincarnation, there must come the realization that everything is part of this very great master plan, and this concerns every single thing. In fact, the entire universe. Everything, including the planets themselves, are constructed along the same basic principles of construction and put together in such a way that it can in a trice be restored to its basic simple elements, even doubtless not just one planet but the entire universe itself. If the powers of creation so decreed, it could implode, disappear in fire and flames, only to be recreated as a new, even more fantastically beautiful and amazing universe than the one it replaced. One might ask, are the people first created or the universe? The answer to that must be the universe, and the basis to all power is the circle, the cylindrical shape, and the rotary way in which power of all sorts swirls, mainly in a clockwise direction. Why is it accepted that the dial of an old-fashioned clock was designed to rotate from left to right? Because it seems most natural to the original inventors, whose brains are also powered in a similar way, from left to right. Most people are right-handed, and life is much more difficult for those who are not, because it's more normal to be right-handed. The creators, and there must have been not millions but billions of those whose task it must have been in the very first place, and still is, to keep the universe working, must have had to create a suitable home for the humanity that was to people it. Where must it all have begun, and exactly how? No one, however clever he or she might be, can do more than conjecture on this much discussed and vexing subject. The universe was and must have been very carefully designed, and in the very beginning it must have been a swirling mass of forces, not just electrical, rotating, waving, oscillating power mediums, until in the fullness of time, billions of years, like the slow maturing of a chicken's egg, once again round or oval as the planet Earth and other living planets similar, and so designed that its course is fixed forever, and for this it can never deviate. The idea of a rogue planet breaking away from its moorings and crashing around the universe, destroying everything in its path, is happily impossible. All living planets must, as part of their basic design, be surrounded by fallow or dead planets, which never could be peopled at all. However, in some cases, if there is any humanity left on a dying planet to people it, and they have become sufficiently intelligent to migrate, they will find one of these fallow planets which can become habitable in the course of a very long time and move there. In the beginning, when life began to stir, you must have the creation of earth, water and land areas, and air swirling around the emerging planet in a circular way, until within the large marshy areas there began to appear the very first life cells, amoeba, growing in masses and totally immersed in water and mud. It must be said that it takes millions and millions of years for a planet to develop into a place suitable for life to begin, as slowly basic little creatures emerge from the marshy swamps and green algae that is the very start of all life forms, plants as well as insects, and then eventually man himself. In Victorian times, any suggestion that there could possibly be any relationship between lower animals, including monkeys, and human beings was not only disgusting but terrible. How could such a thing be? Mankind was created by God, and after death he became divine. What a shocking idea. Man, of course, is not divine, and as far as anyone can see, never becomes divine, whoever he or she might be. There are, as anybody can see, myriads of different types of people of all races, and all of them slowly develop from all the different creatures present on the earth. How could it be that a tiny ant does, in the course of many millions of years, become part of a completely developed human being, either man or woman? And then this is my comment. I cannot at present find the rest of this dictation, but a brief explanation of this last paragraph would be to say that out of water, which is a marvellous and mysterious substance, without which no life can exist, different life forms start to emerge, the first being the amoeba. As with every living thing, including the planet itself, it has a physical body and a spiritual body. It lives each lifetime eating, excreting, dividing to proliferate, and performing some vital task within its surroundings. Eventually, its entity becomes too complicated to remain in its present form, and it is combined with another to go forward to become a higher species. Or it may be combined with the entity of a higher creature to perform some task within its metabolism. This continues in some computerized way until the entity or combination of entities has developed enough to be part of a creature that is now male or female. Each time they mate, each parent gives a layer of brain cells to their offspring. This pushes the creature forward in intelligence and in diversity of character. Once a creature has developed beyond its existing stage, then its entity is combined with another of its own type, or maybe another different species, but at the same level of development, one male and one female, and the combination goes on to become a member of a higher species, the sex of this new combination being decided by the extremely complicated computers that help to organize life on a planet. This combination of creatures and their entities continues until you reach the ape of different sorts. All creatures belong to a race of people, and it is from the combination of these different creatures that they evolve themselves. In turn, the different apes continue to develop and live their different lives, becoming cleverer and more developed, until they reach the end of their lives in this stage. Then 2 male and 2 female are combined to go forward to become the very first stage of humanity on a planet. At this stage, humanity is closer to the animal kingdom and must continue on living many simple lives until, usually in tribes, in the wilder parts of the world, learning to exist in their particular environment, until once again they're considered suitable to move on to a more complicated existence. In another dictation, it states that even the cleverest ape or monkey does not have the gift of humanity. I believe that what is meant by this is that the cleverest can never reach more than the intelligence of a human child of 2 years of age, and they function mostly by instinct. By the time this combination of creatures has developed sufficiently to join the human race, and also too, I think the other thing you have to say is that I think that apes will, they're capable obviously of anger, and but I don't think that they love in the way that humanity does. And that is the thing that I think is born in us when we become human. It's this loving of each other. That is the humanity. But at the very beginning of our existence, when we become human beings, when we're living in the wilder parts of the world, if you remember in 2000 we had that huge tsunami which affected so much of southern India and East Asia, and some of the journalists wanted to find out what had happened to some of the sort of wilder tribes who lived in places like Brunei and Borneo. And the locals said, oh, keep away from them, they're very violent, they're headhunters and things. But when they went to find them, they found most of them were much younger, but they had, there weren't very many old people amongst them. But they said that they had felt the movements in the earth and they'd moved to higher ground and none of them had been hurt. Whereas most of the Europeans who were on holiday in Sri Lanka and Barbados, in those areas, not Barbados, they were sitting on the beach thinking, oh, it's all a bit strange. And then suddenly the tsunami came and many of them were killed, which was a terrible tragedy. So in the early stages of our life, we're more close to nature and more close to the world. So if I carry on with that, by the time this combination of creatures has developed sufficiently to join the human race, he or she will start to develop intuition about their surroundings and their relationship to others that goes just beyond instinctual behaviour. These early tribal lives are generally shorter, each individual being born again quickly and receiving another layer of brain cells from each of his or her parents, going forward to be more intelligent and to gradually work their way up the chain of many different lives, eventually moving beyond their tribal lives to join a more developed race, going from hunter-gatherers to gradually learning to keep livestock and to farm crops until eventually they join one of the white races. Although everything that concerns life and living is being turned on its head at the moment, the truth is plain for all to see, and we have all passed the same way. The only difference between a tribesman living a hunter-gatherer existence at the beginning of this journey and a white university professor living a developed in a Western country is time and many lives in which he has had time to learn, and some of us in the West, however, have no wish to use their abilities or to bother to progress much and continue to return to one life after another, progressing very little. At the present time, without realizing how precious our different races are, we mix ourselves and the different animals of the different races without realizing that we are destroying the careful plan of creation. Every animal plays a vital part in nature, and the humanity to which the animal belongs has evolved from it. The little Spanish bull will one day become part of a Spanish person. We are all the combination of many different species and their combined intelligence and life experiences. We also belong to large family clans who guide us from the other side. Those who belong to strong family clans, and unfortunately due to war and so many other things, so many of these clans really are being broken up. Those who belong to strong clans receive more help in their lives. When we leave our countries and mix ourselves with other nations, we lose this help. We all need to feel we belong somewhere. Those unfortunate enough to be born of very mixed heritage never feel they belong anywhere and are so often cursed with bodies that become fat and sick. Unfortunately, nature always allows us enough rope to hang ourselves with, as the saying goes. Such people also find it increasingly difficult to procreate, as every child has to be genetically related to both their parents. If those parents are too racially mixed, then the chance of there being a child that possesses that complicated combination of genes becomes increasingly unlikely. Consequently, this is another way that civilizations come to an end on a planet. Many of the peoples that make up races in the different countries of the world today are very different to those that originally peopled those countries in times past. The race of Aryans who walked into northern India in prehistoric times have now mixed themselves with the indigenous races already there. Their caste system remains, and much of their learning. Also, some of them still have the remnants of their European blood in the guise of startlingly blue or green eyes. Some even have reddish hair but dark skin. However, the combination of so many races have mixed themselves into the Indian races. Having mixed themselves into the Indian races has given rise to much in the way of health problems. The kidney, apparently, according to the learning in Chinese medicine, stores your genealogy. So, unfortunately, one of the health problems that a lot of Indians suffer with is kidney cancer. And there was a story on the news of two men in Reading, both of whom received a kidney each from a perfectly healthy man, or so our doctors thought, who had died in some accident or other. And both of these two men, once the kidney had been installed in their bodies, developed lymphoma. So obviously that man who had done, who had sadly given them the kidney, was about to go into lymphoma. So this is one of the things that happens when we become very, illness. This is one of the ways that illness starts to occur in a population, when we become so mixed up. And of course, that is being pushed on us now all the time. Every one of our races is so precious and has wonderful things about it. I mean, a wonderful ball that I went to, which was to raise money for education for girls in Zimbabwe. And there were lots of black women there in their national dress, and some wonderful singers. I mean, they were marvellous. And so, the gifts that they possess, so tremendous. And one story that I always saw on the television, again from Zimbabwe, and it was a white farmer who had, his farm had been broken up, and he'd lost everything, even though his family had been in Zimbabwe for years. And they had a farm, and, so people in Zimbabwe under Mugabe in the beginning were almost starving. And of course, the people who suffer the most are the poor black workers on these farms. Anyway, he was very worried about them, and he went to look for them. And he heard that they were just across the border in Tanzania in a barn. And there was a wonderful film, and it always makes me want to cry, when he walked in and he said in their language, I think they spoke Shona, and he told them how he'd been worrying about them and he'd been looking for them. And they were all sitting there with their children on the floor of this barn, and they just looked at him and then just burst into this wonderful African lament. And it's making me feel like I want to cry again. It was just beautiful. So I think when we are each in our own environment, in our own tribes, in our own, we're learning something precious for all of us. And it's something important that we should all recognize, not the way everything is now. Whereas if you're, where they're trying to turn everything on its head and make people ashamed of the colour of their skin. Why should they be? They have this great cultures behind them. And we all need to be proud of who we are and where we've come from. And that's the end of that milestone.